Yo, check this out. This is Wayne Wonder, representing for Warrior LTV. You see the vision, don't it? See the vision. Warrior LTV. Keep it locked.
Now, I'm gonna tell you. We, us, as bloggers, these are the issues that we need to address. You understand what I said? Set the bar for the youth. Share, like, and subscribe, and stay tuned to the channel. I don't know all this. Yes, my brothers and sisters. Greetings in the mighty name of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I first, and all things good and wonderful amongst us and about us. Welcome viewers and subscribers. Viewers, if you like the content, subscribe and make it help grow the platform. See, today we are going to remember Patrice Lumumba. You know, see it. The Congolese leader who lead Congo into independence and was disappeared. You see, now, in recent days, the Belgian authority, who was the colonial power in Congo at the time when Patrice Lamumba disappeared, they returned a gold teeth of Patrice Lamumba, one of the man's teeth. Now, the significance of this to me is to point out the brutality and the sadistic tortures and mentality of the colonizers, not just to us, but to them own people. Because just imagine the shame and the disgrace who I would be living with, today, regardless how conceited I want to be, or just to know that this is how my authority becomes authority and maintain authority to this day, with this sick, twisted culture. How you go, you already killed a man, but what kind of sickness is gonna make you keep a body part, a macabre momentum? Anyway, we are gonna read the story still. We are read the document I made the item here, because it's not a story, it's a true thing, the truth, see. So we are read about Patrice Lamumba. Please just know, say, in my mind, I'm read all of my life, Rasta. I'm not used to this public reading, but we are do our best still. See, I'll give thanks. The gold tooth is all that remains of assassinated Congolese independence hero Patrice Lamumba, shot dead by a firing squad in 1961 with the tacit backing of former colonial power Belgium. His body was then buried in a shallow grave, dug up, transported 200 kilometers, 125 miles, interred again, buried again, exhumed again, dig up again, and then hacked to death, then hacked to pieces, and chop it up to pieces, and finally dissolved in acid. That's how much of a indignation them have for the general. And see, that's them see, even in a death, him still could be. I don't know how anyway we are got to. The Belgian police commissioner, Gerard Soete, who oversaw and participated in the destruction of the remains, took the tooth, he later admitted. He also talked about a second tooth and two of the corpse's finger, but these have not been found. Wait, and soon hear the weirdest part of the story. See, these have not been found. The tooth have now been returned to the family at a ceremony in Brussels. So it is impulse to pocket the body part echoed the behavior of European colonial officials down the decades who took remains back home as macabre mementos. But it also served as a final humiliation of a man that Belgium considered an enemy. You see, but it also humiliates the portrayal of the dignified, noble man that they try to portray these days. You see, so kind of a double-edged sword pound there, so you see, guys, nobody can blindfold me and tell me so them pleased with this history of themselves. Nobody, no you today, no white, no black, no nothing. You see. So it appearing in a documentary in 1999, described the tooth and fingers he took as a type of hunting trophy. The language suggests that for the Congolese, for the Belgian policeman, Lamumba, who was revered across the continent as a leading voice of African liberation, was less than human. For Lamumba's daughter, Juliana, the question is whether the perpetrators were human. What amount of hatred must you have to do that, she asked. This is a reminder of what happened with the Nazis taking pieces of peoples, and that's a crime against humanity, she told the BBC. BBC already know that, baby, it's just that BBC don't consider Lamumba human either. Lamumba had risen to become Prime Minister at the age of 34, elected in the final days of colonial rule. He headed the cabinet of the newly independent nation. In June 1960, at the handover of power, Belgian King Bedouin praised the colonial administration and spoke about his ancestor Leopold II as the civilizer of the country. There was no mention of the millions who died or were brutalized under his reign when he ruled what was then known as the Congo Free State as his personal property. This failure to acknowledge the past foreshadowed years of denial in Belgium, which it has only now begun to come to terms with. Lamumba was not so reticent. In an address that was not scheduled on the official program, the Prime Minister spoke about the violence and degradation that the Congolese had suffered. In devastating rhetoric, interrupted by rounds of applause and a standing ovation when he concluded, he described the humiliating slavery that was imposed on us by force. The Belgians were stunned. According to academic Ludo de Witt, who wrote a groundbreaking account of the assassination. Never before had a black man, a black African, dared to speak like this in front of Europeans, the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, who de Witt says had been described as an illiterate thief in the Belgian press, was seen as having humiliated the king and other Belgian officials. Some have said that with his speech, Lumumba signed his own death warrant, but his murder the following year was also wrapped up in Cold War maneuvers and a Belgian desire to maintain control. The Americans also plotted his death because of a possible pivot towards the Soviet Union and his uncompromising anti-colonialism, while a British official wrote a memo suggesting that killing him was an option. Nevertheless, there seems to be a personal element to the way Lumumba was vilified and pursued. The total destruction of the body, as well as a way to get rid of the evidence, seems like an effort to obliterate Lumumba from the memory. There would be no memorial, making it almost possible to deny that he existed at all. It was not enough just to bury him, but he is still remembered, not least by his daughter Juliana, a prime mover in the campaign to get the tooth returned home, who went to Brussels to retrieve it. She let out a warm chuckle as she recalls her childhood memories. As the youngest and the only girl in the family, she says she was very close to her father. Miss Lumumba was less than 5 when he became Prime Minister. She remembered being allowed to be in his office, just sitting and looking at at my father when he was working. For me, it was daddy. But she recognized that her father belonged to the country because he died for Congo and for his own values and conviction of the dignity of the African person. She acknowledges that the handing over of the tooth in Belgium and bringing it back to the Democratic Republic of Congo is symbolic because what remains is not really enough. But he has to come back to his country where his blood was shed. The tooth was taken around the vast country before being buried in the capital. For years, though, the Lumumba family did not know exactly what had happened to their father as official silence surrounded the circumstance of his death. Lumumba's journey from prime minister to victim of assassination took less than 7 months. Shortly after independence, the country was hit by a secessionist crisis as the mineral-rich southeastern Katanga province declared that it was splitting off from the rest of the country. In the political chaos that followed, Belgian troops were sent in on the grounds that they would protect Belgian nationals, but they also helped support the Katangan administration, which was seen as more sympathetic. Lamumba himself was dismissed as prime minister by the president, and just over a week later, Army Chief of Staff Colonel Joseph Mobutu seized power. Lamumba was then placed under house arrest, escaped and rearrested in December 1960 before being held in the west of the country. His presence there was seen as a possible source of instability, and the Belgian government encouraged his transfer to Katanga. During the flight there on 16th of January 1961, he was assaulted. He was also beaten on arrival as the Katangan leaders pondered what to do with him. It was decided that he would face a firing squad, and on the 17th of January he was shot along with 2 allies. This is when Police Commissioner Soete stepped in. Realizing that the bodies would be discovered, a decision was taken to make them disappear once and for all. There must be no trace left, according to testimonies quoted in DeWitt's book, The Assassination of Lamumba. Armed with saws, sulfuric acid, face mask, and whiskey, Soete then led a team to move, destroy, and dispose of the remains. It was a process that he was later to describe as traveling to the depths of hell. But it was not until nearly 40 years later, in 1999, that he publicly acknowledged that he was involved and that he still actually had a tooth in his possession. He said he had got rid of the other body parts he took. Miss Lamumba sighed deeply when she recalled hearing that there was a part of her father that still exists. You can understand that what I felt about that, she said, her voice full of emotion. It is not known that what Soete did with the tooth when it was in his possession. A photograph shows it in a padded box, but whether it was on display is not clear. But it did remain in his family. It resurfaced in 2016, when Soete's daughter, Godelieve, gave an interview to Belgian magazine Humo, published just before the 55th anniversary of Lumumba's killing. She spoke about her poor daddy who had to suffer with the knowledge of what he did. Miss Soete also thought her family should get an apology for the order the Belgian authorities gave her father. That's, the whole existence of that woman a weird style. She still have the teeth in her position, and she say her father is to be apologized to. Still, you know what she think about Lumumba and his family yet. You see, I guess I with it a bit. See, she said he had kept a private archive, and though after his death in 2000 a lot was thrown away, she was able to save interesting things. Among those things was the tooth that she brought out to show the interviewer and photographer. It was then seized by the Belgian police after DeWitt filed a complaint, and following a 4-year legal battle, a court ruled that it should be returned to the Lamumba family. It have got to. It's the last year. A part of the campaign to get it back, Miss Lumumba wrote, my battery are dead, but anyway, a part of the campaign to get it back, Miss Lumumba wrote a moving and poetic open letter to King Felipe. Why, after his terrible murder, have Lumumba's remains been condemned to remain a soul forever wandering, without a grave to shelter his eternal rest? She asks. With the return of the two, the former Prime Minister will have a final resting place in a special mausoleum in the capital, Kinshasa. This is what we usually do in our culture. We like to bury our dead, said Congolese historian and the country's UN ambassador George Nzangola Entalaja. It is a comfort for the family and the people of the Congo because Lumumba is our hero and we would like to give him a decent burial. Despite the burial, there is still a need to reckon with the past. DeWitt's book, which shattered years of official silence, led to the creation in 1999 of a parliamentary inquiry charged with determining the exact circumstance of the assassination and the possible involvement of the Belgian officials. In its conclusion, 2 years later, it wrote that the norms of international politically correct thinking were different in the 1960s. Nevertheless, despite not uncovering a document ordering the murder of Lumumba, the inquiry found that certain members of the government were morally responsible for circumstances leading to the death. Now, I'm not going too tough, but I could conclude. The Belgian Foreign Minister at the time, Louis Michel, then expressed apologies and profound and sincere regrets to the Lamumba family and the Congolese people. Professor Nzangola Entalaja, speaking to the BBC in a personal capacity, does not believe Belgium has fully accepted its role in the killing. Belgium refuses to take responsibility for something which they know they did, so it is not totally satisfactory for